Welcome back to more UCL Fantasy content. This will be the best team for Matchday 11, where you have unlimited transfers for the round of 16, and this will essentially be like last season in terms of the amount of transfers you get at each stage of the competition. We are in familiar territory, but if you have any questions, then check out my How to Play UCL Fantasy video, and also the chip strategy guide to determine the best time to use the Limitless and the Wildcard if you still have them available. Like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss a single upload or live stream. On Tuesday, I will be going live as usual for that UCL Fantasy deadline stream, and keep your eyes peeled for my team selection. There's already a first draft on this channel, and this best team has some changes from that draft. And also we have to bear in mind is that I've got the wild card in my back pocket, so I can go for more kind of aggressive moves and target the match days right in front of me. But with the best team, you also have to think about future match days, especially if you have no chips available, because otherwise you have to rely on free transfers, and you get plenty of them, to be fair. Unlimited in match day 11, then you get free transfers for the second leg, and then 5 free transfers for the first leg of each round. So the quarterfinals, semi-finals, and the Champions League final, you'll get 5 free transfers. But like I mentioned, all of the ins and outs are explained in my How to Play UCL Fantasy video and the chip strategy guide. But let's get straight into this, building the best team for Matchday 11, so this squad won't just be useful for the round of 16, but it will also lay a solid foundation for the rest of the tournament. My overall squad value is 107.6 million, and it will vary for people watching. Now, what you see exactly on screen is for someone who's starting UCL Fantasy now, and they didn't play in the knockout playoff rounds or throughout the league phase, and by doing so, you were able to build some team value with some of the highest performing players in UCL Fantasy. So that's why my team value will be different to yours and other people watching. But let's start off with the 2 goalkeepers. I'm going for some different picks compared to what I discussed in my first draft, and ultimately depends on your chip strategies and if you've got the wild card in your back pocket. I don't usually recommend going for very expensive goalkeepers in fantasy games, especially in FPL, but it is slightly different in UCL Fantasy, particularly when we get to the knockout stages, because you want to pick goalkeepers from teams you expect to go very far in this competition. And what a better way to go for that sort of pick and tick all the boxes with Thibaut Courtois and representing Real Madrid there. They do have a tough route to the final if they were to get to that stage, and they are facing Atletico Madrid, which won't be easy, but they are still favourites in that tie. And then they face Arsenal or PSV, and ultimately Real Madrid will be massive favourites to go through to the semi-finals as a result. So I think Courtois could be very useful, not just for match days 11 and 12, but also up until match day 15 and 16 at the very least. That's the way I'm kind of anticipating Real Madrid to really advance to the next rounds and how the Champions League will go. So Courtois offers a steady pair of hands. He's also got quite a high ceiling for a goalkeeper because he can make penalty saves and also just make multiple saves in general to get 7 or 8 when Real Madrid keep a clean sheet. Ultimately, their defense isn't the most reliable, but when you are looking at covering Los Merengues defensively, Antonio Rudiger isn't really the same in terms of ball recoveries as he was at Chelsea, and all the other options aren't as reliable as Courtois would be in goal. So my preference in covering the Real Madrid defence is with the Belgian shot stopper instead. Now the backup goalkeeper, you could say, or the Wednesday option, is Alisson Becker, who is on the other side of the draw, which is also very useful in terms of kind of denying or preventing these clashes between Courtois and Alisson until the latter rounds of this tournament, like the Champions League final. But ultimately, this is a lot of money invested in this position. I do get that. And both of them are nowhere near the high scoring goalkeepers because both of them have suffered injury problems throughout the season, particularly in the case of Alisson. But I think they'll get a lot of points in the knockout stages. And despite the fact that Liverpool play PSG, I think they can keep 1 clean sheet, and that would likely come at Anfield in match day 12. And you can also go for Trent or Van Dijk in that defensive line. I think they're decent choices. The same goes for Konate, but with Alisson, you've got that Liverpool route, and I think they've got a great chance of reaching the semi-final at the very least. So going for Courtois and Alisson works very well until the end of the tournament. No matter what your plans are and what your chip strategy is, I would highly recommend going for one Inter Milan defender or Josep Martinez in goal, who has 0% ownership. And the reason why I don't mention Jan Sommer is because, as described in my first draft video, Jan Sommer had surgery to his hand, so he'll miss the next month worth of action. Does that mean Inter Milan are maybe more vulnerable defensively? Perhaps so, but Josep Martinez has put in some great performances in his stead, and he even made 6 saves against Lazio in a 2-0 victory very recently, and he won player of the match. So I think Josep Martinez is a great choice, which I also talked about in a lot of detail in my recent video, but Dumfries might be the best defender to go for because Inter Milan have quite a lot of injuries to squad players and also Carlos Augusto, so that means Dumfries should be more nailed for the knockout stages. But it is De Vrij who is the highest scoring Inter Milan defender in UCL Fantasy. He has started virtually every single game in this season's competition, and I wouldn't even mind going for Dumfries and De Vrij simultaneously, or even going for Josep Martinez between the sticks. But next up, I'm going to go for Gabriel. But with Arsenal, I have to say, I'm just not confident with them as I would have been a couple of weeks ago, and their January transfer window has been shambolic, and since that has happened, they had injuries to key players offensively, and that means Havertz is out for the rest of the season. Martinelli and Saka are still going to be out for another month, so the only way we'll see them back in the Champions League this season is if Arsenal progress to the next round, where they'll face Real Madrid or Atletico Madrid. So Gabriel might not be a great long-term solution, but he's got the goal threat. He's also very good for ball recoveries, and Arsenal are still favourites to go through against PSV, but I've got a feeling the Dutch side might win the first leg, and we've seen this competition and tie quite a lot of times recently. In the Europa League 2 years ago, they faced each other. Arsenal won 1-0 at the Emirates and then lost 2-0 in Eindhoven. And last season, it was a 4-0 win for Arsenal in the first game back in the Champions League, and they drew 1-1 in Matchday 6 at the time, the final match of the group stages. And Arsenal did rotate quite a lot, to be fair, but Gabriel and Saliba featured. But I have to say, PSV are in a great position here to possibly take the advantage going to the Emirates and really cause some problems, because my issue with Arsenal is because they have no attack, that puts more pressure on their defenders to keep clean sheets, because ultimately they're not going to score many goals. So I would not be recommending a triple up or even a quadruple up in Arsenal. I think 1 or 2 is the sweet spot, and if you decide to go without any Arsenal players, I would not blame you whatsoever. But next up is going to be a Borussia Dortmund defender, and whilst Emre Can is on penalties when he's on the pitch, I would recommend Schlotterbeck instead. He has a few more points this season, he's a ball recovery machine, and in the last campaign, he was one of the best defenders in UCL Fantasy, and he has also shown signs of that in some of the recent rounds, like Matchdays 9 and 10 against Sporting, with back-to-back clean sheets and ball recoveries to deliver very solid returns overall. You can also cover Dortmund defensively with Kobel in goal, but I would argue Schlotterbeck is the best way of doing so because of those ball recoveries. He's not going to get many goals or assists, but I think you don't really need them with the clean sheets, and also that very important metric in UCL Fantasy. Ball recoveries are something you really want to target in this defensive line. But let's complete this position with 2 other options, and one of them is going to be there for the attacking threat. He has a tough fixture on paper, but Grimaldo can get goals or assists against any single opponent, and this season he has gotten 7 points against Inter Milan, massive returns as well in somewhat difficult fixtures, and it's very rare that you'll see Grimaldo blank because he has so many avenues to points through clean sheets, the odd ball recovery, and also the goals and the assists, which is what he's really known for. And don't rule out Player of the Match awards for Grimaldo. He makes so many key passes and creates big opportunities for his teammates, and he's such a consistent player for Bayer Leverkusen. That left wing back spot and the way that Bayer Leverkusen play under Xabi Alonso is perfect for the likes of Grimaldo and Frimpong. Not much separates them overall, to be honest, but I do think Grimaldo has the slight edge throughout the entire season. He's shown a bit more consistency, but in recent months I think it's been very close, and sometimes Frimpong has shaded it. I'm very happy I had both of them in Matchday 8 for the final matchday of the league phase. But speaking of final, let's complete this defensive line with one more option, and this might surprise you, but looking at the long term, I think going for one Barcelona defender could be worthwhile, and Inigo Martinez is my current preference. He has scored a few goals this season, gotten the odd assist, and can get multiple ball recoveries. I wouldn't recommend Kubarsi, to be fair. He was someone I really bigged up in the summer, but he hasn't really proven it in UCL Fantasy so much. Jules Koundé also has a good history of ball recoveries, so he's not a bad option, but Inigo Martinez offers more attacking threat, and I think he has just nailed on in that Barcelona defence. You might even want to go for Szczesny, who's a 4 million goalkeeper, and he can make a lot of saves, and despite some shaky performances to start off his Barcelona career, he has really stepped up in recent games, and he could be a very solid choice as your cheap goalkeeper playing on the Wednesday. But I've gone for Inigo Martinez here, and this sort of balance works very well. You've got no defensive double-ups with this setup, and a lot of teams who can go very far in this season's competition. It should come as no surprise to see Mohamed Salah feature in yet another one of these videos. I've been recommending him all season in UCL Fantasy and FPL. Liverpool are top of the Premier League and they're going to go on to win it. They're in a Carabao Cup final and they also finished top of the Champions League group stages. I don't think PSG will be an easy game, especially the first leg in France, but I would back Liverpool to score goals in both matches, and Salah is virtually getting a goal contribution in every single game, so I'd highly recommend them. I can understand if you want to go for Barcola or Dembele, because I think one PSG player or even two could be worthwhile in the first leg. Hakimi at the back is another great option with his attacking threat, but I would definitely favour Liverpool over both legs, and even if they slipped up in France, I would back them to turn things around at Anfield. And Salah is someone you don't want to back against this season. His ownership is much lower here than it is in FPL, and I think the returns haven't been on the same level, but he has still been very consistent in this competition, and he's going to be a great option from now until the time Liverpool are eliminated or they go on to win this season's Champions League. Next up is Morgan Rogers. He plays on the Tuesday, and I know you just want to pick the best players. I completely get that. I also want to do the same thing, but you also have to be slightly mindful of the Tuesday-Wednesday balance, and overall with this squad, you will have 7 Tuesday players and 8 on the Wednesday, which isn't exactly ideal, but let's not forget when we go to Matchday 12, the second leg of the round of 16, it will then switch and you'll have 8 Tuesday players and 7 on the Wednesday, which is a decent balance overall. I don't think any Aston Villa attacker or even player is that really reliable, to be honest. And you've got Asensio at 6.7 million. You might want to go for him instead. He scored 2 goals against Chelsea very recently. And Rodgers has been very disappointing in FPL. But I have to say, in the cups like the FA Cup and the Champions League, he's shown a lot of consistency there in the recent games at least. Because in the Champions League, he returned against Bologna, blanked in every single other game until that hat-trick in Matchday 8 against Celtic, delivering 20 points. So he has that very high ceiling and he's a quality player, but his best attributes and qualities aren't really related to goals and assists. He's a carrier of the ball and is very impressive to watch. He's got that strength as well to hold off defenders. So I think with Aston Villa, I'd lean towards Rodgers. You've also got Ollie Watkins up front, but because you've only got 3 forward slots and a lot of competition there, I'd recommend an Aston Villa midfielder instead. But let's not forget, they have faced Club Brugge already this season, and Club Brugge won 1-0 due to a penalty, and Villa had a completely off day. Rodgers himself didn't play particularly well, so I don't think it'll be that straightforward, especially in Belgium in the first leg. You might even want to consider Club Brugge midfielders like Vanaken, who got 12 points against Aston Villa in the reverse fixture or earlier this season, and you've also got a few other informed players there who showed their worth against Atalanta in the knockout playoff rounds. But let's now move on to another Tuesday option who I think is even better than Morgan Rogers, especially in Matchday 11, and that's Adeyemi, who got 23 points back in Matchday 2, and he's been fairly consistent in this season's competition with returns against Sporting in Matchdays 9 and 10, and I think he's a very decent differential here. I wouldn't even mind doubling up on that Borussia Dortmund attack. It looks very promising against Lille, but if they were to go through, they will likely face Barcelona, and of course Benfica is a possibility, but you wouldn't fancy Dortmund against Barcelona in that provisional quarter-final. So that's something you need to be mindful about. So maybe trimming down these Dortmund assets by 1 might be the best case scenario for you, and ultimately you can tweak things based on your preferences and predictions for this season's Champions League, not to mention your chip strategy, because like I mentioned with my own team, I've got the wildcard in my back pocket, so I can afford to be more aggressive and just focus on what's right in front of me, and then I can bail myself out with the wildcard chip. But I think Adeyemi looks very promising. Lille are no mugs though, and they beat some very good teams this season like Real Madrid, Atletico Madrid, and they also gave Liverpool a very challenging battle. Despite going down to 10 men, they only lost 2-1 in that particular game. They also beat Feyenoord 6-1 in Matchday 8, and they've got good options of their own like Jonathan David up front. But let's now go for very template options who I think are definitely worth the hassle, and they offer tremendous value. They are criminally underpriced this season, and Florian Wirtz is one of them. It is Bayern Munich away, and maybe in your case you're favouring Bayern Munich to go through. So if that's what you're predicting, you might want to go for Elise or Musiala instead. The same goes for a Kim Min-jae or a Upamecano instead of Grimaldo, but I would probably favour Leverkusen slightly, and in the recent 0-0 draw between these two sides, Leverkusen absolutely battered Bayern Munich, who had a very defensive approach. They wanted to preserve their 8-point lead in the Bundesliga. They got it done, but only just. Neuer had a great game on the day, and the likes of Wirtz missed a big chance. His record against Bayern Munich overall isn't particularly appealing. Only 1 goal and 1 assist against the Bavarians in his entire career, but I think it's a great opportunity for Leverkusen to go through and for Wirtz to have a big say in the winner there. But the final option is someone who I think is almost essential in this midfield, and I'd definitely rank him higher than Adeyemi, Rodgers, Wirtz, and most midfielders, maybe even Salah. And that's Rafinha, who got a brace against Benfica the last time he played them. He got player of the match, and it was a last-minute winner in that 5-4 classic that we saw between Barcelona and Benfica on Portuguese soil. And you might want to go for Benfica assets like Kokcha in the midfield, Pavlidis up front. I think that's perfectly reasonable, but I'm backing Barcelona to go through, and I think they've got a very easy path to the Champions League semi-final, and Rafinha is probably the best midfielder in the game right now. He has a great record ever since last season. Back in March, he did very well against PSG, even though Barcelona went out at that stage, and he's just been getting goals and assists on such a regular basis, even against the biggest of opponents like Real Madrid, Bayern Munich. He just keeps on doing it, and I think Rafinha is a much better option than Yamal, who is a very good player, of course, for his age, and he gets a lot of assists, but the goal scoring isn't quite there yet, and Yamal is going to pale in comparison to Rafinha, and that's something I've discussed since the summer when Rafinha had less than 5% ownership at the time. So that's the midfield. I'm very confident about it. The only kind of nitpicks you could say is Rodgers and maybe Wirtz, and going in a different direction. I have mentioned a few alternatives in each position, and in this case, I think Dembele or Barcola would definitely be worth considering. Elise or Musiala as well. But I'm very happy with the structure, not just for the Tuesday and Wednesday, but also considering future rounds. I'm almost completely settled on the front three, but there's one 50-50 call which could go either way from now until the rest of the tournament between Vinicius Jr. and Kylian Mbappe. Over the course of this season, I think Vinicius has been much better in the Champions League until Matchday 10 when Kylian Mbappe scored that hat-trick against Manchester City, but before that, he only outscored Vinicius once, and in terms of double-digit hauls, the Brazilian has been doing it very consistently, with multiple Player of the Match awards and also goals and assists combined in the same match, whilst Mbappe has missed so many big chances and only been able to get a goal or an assist in a single game and not able to get 10 plus points. But that might change now, and I think Mbappe has been more informed with 12 goals in his last 10 appearances across all competitions, and Vinicius has really struggled, especially in La Liga. So let me know your thoughts down in the comment section below. Do you think Mbappe is now clearly the better asset? Only 10 points separate them in Vinicius' favour, but let's not forget, Vinicius has played 2 fewer games. He missed out against the likes of Liverpool, for example, so that also plays a very pivotal role, and maybe the gap would be bigger between these two, and ultimately we'd be more favourable in Vinicius' favour. But I think it's very close. Either Vinicius or Mbappe, take your pick there. If you're going for form, I think you go for the Frenchman instead. But Vinicius has that Champions League pedigree as well, just like Mbappe, but he's also got the ability to get goals and assists in the same match. And let's not forget, in the first leg against Man City, it was Vinicius who got 13 points and the Player of the Match award with 2 assists, including that last-minute one for Bellingham to win the game. Let's now go for Guirassy, who for me offers tremendous value. Only 1 blank this season in the Champions League, which unfortunately came in Matchday 10 when he missed the penalty against Sporting. Otherwise, it would be a 100% record for him because he has been so consistent. And if you want to pick one Dortmund player across all positions, and you've got Kobel in goal, Schlotterbeck and Chan in the defensive line, Adeyemi and Gross in the midfield, I still think Guirassy is by far the best option. And he scored 4 goals over the weekend in a 6-0 win for Borussia Dortmund, and Gross got 4 assists. But the final player is Robert Lewandowski. He offers amazing value. I'm surprised he doesn't cost 10 million or actually even higher than that. And I didn't own him once in the Champions League phase, which is probably a big mistake of mine, but it also goes to show the plethora of options we've got at our disposal. I mean, just look at the names that miss out from this forward line, one of Vinicius or Mbappe. It is a coin toss, so it can go either way, and I really recommend just going for, your pick and sticking with your gut. Sometimes Vinicius will outscore Mbappe, and on other occasions the Frenchman will come out on top, especially with the goal scoring. You've also got Ollie Watkins against Club Brugge, maybe Jukla, who has shown some good form for Club Brugge recently, and you've also got the likes of Jonathan David against Borussia Dortmund. That could be a very underrated pick. Pavlidis scored a hat-trick against Barcelona, and despite the fact he did that, it was Rafinha winning Player of the Match. But you're really blessed with options in this position. Harry Kane is still solid against Bayer Leverkusen, but I think one of Vinicius or Mbappe, Guirassy and Lewandowski make up the best front three in this season's Champions League until one of those players, if not maybe more of them, are eliminated. With the captaincy though, let's kind of be very brief with this. I think one of Guirassy or Vinicius or Mbappe, depending on your preference, would be the best Tuesday option, and I would favour the Real Madrid attacker. Then on the Wednesday, I'd go all in on Barcelona, so Lewandowski and Rafinha are the best options there, and my favourite would be Rafinha right now, but Lewandowski will score more goals, generally speaking. I just think Rafinha has a higher ceiling with the assist threat, the creativity, and the player of the match award potential, which you could also argue in Yamal's favour over Lewandowski, but I don't share that same opinion, and I think Yamal is a level below both Lewandowski and Rafinha in UCL Fantasy. But let me now show you differentials and other players to consider in each position, so you've got the ultimate pool of players for UCL Fantasy. Between the sticks, there are 6 goalkeepers I would recommend. Those include Courtois and Alisson, as discussed throughout this entire podcast. You've also got Kobel and Joseph Martinez if you want to go very short term, and once Sommer comes back, and if Inter Milan were to go through to the next round, you can then go for Sommer instead of Martinez. There's also Szczesny at 4 million with a great path to the Champions League final, and David Raya, who looks decent on paper against PSV, but then I don't think Arsenal have a great chance against Atletico Madrid or Real Madrid in the quarterfinals. The defenders include De Vrij, Hakimi, Emre Can, Frimpong, Van Dijk, and there are even more options like Trent Alexander-Arnold, Konate, Saliba, and even more like Boscagli from PSV. It all depends on the team you're backing to go through to the next round. Alexandro from Lille has so much ball recovery potential as well. In the midfield, you've got Perisic, who scored in both matches against Juventus to help PSV qualify to this round. One of Dembele or Barcola would be a decent shout as well, but my preference would be of Dembele, and I think Liverpool will have too much for PSG. Elise or Musiala are both solid choices, but they can be quite underwhelming at times, especially in the case of Musiala, considering his price tag. Yamal is an underrated shout in that Barcelona attack, but I don't think he's on the same level as Rafinha or Lewandowski, and Pascal Gross can get ball recoveries, player of the match awards, and the odd goal or assist. He got 4 of them this weekend, so that is a very low-owned differential for you. Maybe Asensio from Aston Villa is someone else to consider, or you go the other way and go for Vanaken, who got 12 points against Aston Villa the last time these two teams met. So you've got plenty of options in each position. Bellingham, once he returns from that suspension in matchday 12, would add to the list in this midfield. And up front, I mean, who do you even go for? One of Mbappe or Vinicius would likely miss out. You can go for both of them, but I'd recommend diversifying your forward line. You've got Harry Kane and Pavlidis in this alternative section. And let's not forget Jonathan David. He is quite underrated as well. And there are even more options where that came from. You can't cover them all, and you have to prioritize and have to pick 3 and hope for the very best in that position. And even with the midfielders and defenders, it won't be completely easy, but I think the forwards is always the toughest to kind of set apart, because you've got some of the best options who show great form for club and country, and even in the Champions League, they've got great records to boot, but you can only pick 3 of them, and the same goes for the captaincy. We've got one on the Tuesday and one on the Wednesday. That's all been covered in today's podcast. With the players you should substitute or leave on the bench, those are going to be your Wednesday players. What you want to ensure, though, is have those Tuesday players in your starting 11, and then once they have played during the substitution window, you can take them off for those yet to play and maximize your chances of getting points. After that detailed analysis, that concludes yet another UCL Fantasy video for this season, the best team for Matchday 11, and you're one step closer now to getting the full coverage for UCL Fantasy. The deadline stream on Tuesday will conclude the definitive coverage for this fantasy format, and the same goes for my team selection, which is headed your way very soon. I've got the wildcard in my back pocket, so I'm going to be very aggressive with some of my moves and going for some lower owned players that others aren't considering, and really targeting what's right in front of me in the round of 16. But if you don't have those chips available, then it's probably in your best interest to look a bit longer term and see the bigger picture. Otherwise, you could be in a position where you have a lot of eliminated players, and despite having 3 transfers in the second leg and 5 free transfers in the first leg of each round, that might come quite short if you aren't too careful enough with your planning. Thank you very much for watching this video and listening to this podcast. If you enjoyed it or found it insightful, then like the video, subscribe to the channel, and hit that notification bell so don't miss a single upload or live stream. Let's try to get this to over 200 likes and to keep on pushing towards new goals like 33,000 subscribers. Follow me on X, Instagram and Blue Sky, Dylan RCM. Check the UCL Fantasy League, the Discord server, my Spotify, and also my Patreon, which is patreon.com/DylanRCM. You can also click the join button on YouTube for early access to my videos, amongst many other perks. It'd be a pleasure to have you on board for the Tuesday deadline stream for UCL Fantasy. And let's not forget FPL with many more reaction streams, deadline streams, and videos headed your way.